These drawers are extremely simple drawers. They look simple, they're simple to make. I love them because my drawer strategy benefits from a drawer that's very simple to spin up really quickly without getting out a dovetail jig. I'm going to show you how to install slides based on offsets instead of measurements, because that's something that a lot of people are intimidated by if they've never done drawers before. So I just want to show you how to make these things, because most drawers are much nicer than this, and I don't think that's proper for my shop. I think simple, strong is ideal. No rabbits, no dovetails, just glue and staples. Extremely solid. This one here is loaded with spray paint cans. Been like this for 5 years, hasn't given out. Fortunately, the drawer slides came with instructions. Unfortunately, I cut right through them, but fortunately we don't need them. It's pretty easy to do some subtractive analysis because we have all the parts right here to measure. The drawer bottom is going to be our sort of starting point, and then we'll tack on the front and the back. Then we'll tack on the sides. So let's figure out what size this needs to be, then build the rest of the drawer around it. To do that, we need to know the depth of the box and the width. So depth is 14 and the width is 26.5. Now, I don't like to make the drawers go all the way back to the board in the back of the cabinet. I just like to account for maybe a little bit of error or just have a little bit of play back there so that each time I close the drawer, it's not smacking the wood back there. So I'm gonna go ahead and change this 14 deep to 13.75. That's gonna be our working space. We're gonna start with those numbers for subtracting the parts for the drawer to get to the bottom of this, which would be 26.5 minus the sides minus the slides. The width of all of those, when you subtract, is 2 inches. And if you look really close there, I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually more like 1.9, 1.95 inches or something like that, because the Baltic Birch plywood is a little bit thinner than 1/2 inch. That's all right, we don't need to account for that because these slides have a little bit of play in them. And these slides like to be mounted when they're kind of being pulled out like that just a little bit. They seem to work a lot better that way than if they're just sort of crammed in to the spot exactly as the dimensions showed. All right, so this is our pretend drawer base, and we know it's going to be 24.5 inches wide as we just established, and the depth will be 13.75 minus the front and the back, which is just about 1 inch. We'll call it 1 inch. So 12.75 by 24.5. And since I'm doing several drawers, I'm just going to go ahead and start with the 24.5. So I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 big strips of 24.5 inch wide stock. That way I have them for all the drawer bottoms and the fronts and the backs, since all those will be 24.5 inches wide. And here I'm using the sled to cut the other dimension of the bottoms, at 12 3/4 wide. Height. Now these drawers are intended to offload some of the contents of these organizers up here, so I determined that an interior height of 1 3/4 inch would be appropriate for these drawers, these 5 I'm building here. So that 1 3/4 plus the 1/2 inch for the base equals 2 1/4, which means the front, back, and side pieces need to be cut at 2 1/4 inches tall. Then I'll put a handle in this. I'm going to go ahead and find the center of one of those boards, group them together, extend that center line right there. Now I'm using the combination square not to measure anything, but to simply use it as an offset tool. So I'm center punching at the corner, but I'm aligning the other side of the tool with the line I drew at the top of the board earlier. That just helps to quickly make these marks without actually having to figure out a dimension or do any real measuring, just all about the offset. These lines are merely instructions for the bandsaw. So the important part is to just knock the edges off. It doesn't really matter to get it nice, just to get those splintery bits off. Now this may not be the proper tool for the job, but it gets it done fast. So when my wife was reviewing this video, she mentioned that maybe I should make a note that sometimes I actually do make nice things. Because this video makes it look otherwise, like I just really don't care about things. Hold on. Plan on making a video about this at some point, but there was a certain time that I saw that Honey Badger Don't Care video.
Oh, it runs backwards?
And it changed the way I work. There were things that I was caring too much about, like a tape shelf. I was being really obsessive over the design of a tape shelf. And when it occurred to me that I'd rather spend my time making nice things that aren't tape shelves, I grabbed my air nailer and just started spraying the wall with nails and plywood and made a tape shelf in a record time. Anyway, that's kind of extreme. But yeah, the aesthetics of this thing are a little bit Honey Badger-ish, and that's by design. For this sort of thing, I use 1-inch long, narrow crown staples. The crown of the staple is sort of clamping by nature. It pulls that first board into the next one when that staple shot in there. One quick tip, I haven't had any shoot-throughs, not because I'm really accurate or anything, but I'm using the workbench as a guide for the stapler. And for glue cleanup, I just smear it on the rest of the board, and that's okay because it's a shop drawer, and you can do that. Alright, so the drawers are pretty much done, but I haven't done the sides yet, and that's because I much prefer to do the sides when I can measure exactly what they need to be, rather than whatever sort of odd calculations it takes to try and figure that out before it's assembled with the undersized plywood. And if I ended up making this a little bit different size, it's just easier to see, 13 7/8. All right, important note here on reference edges again. On each of these sides, I'm aligning it with the front of the drawer. Even when I rotate it, I make sure to align it with the first staple at the front of the drawer, so the front is flush, since the front is the reference edge for when I mount the slides on here. Alright, it's time to install the drawer slides, but before we go just willy-nilly screwing these things into the wood, let's think through reference surfaces, because we're going to be doing offsets to those reference surfaces. We're done with measuring, so let's pause and talk about reference surfaces. When I'm thinking through placement, I might think, okay, I want this slide to be, say, 4 inches from the top. That would be the reference surface, the top, if I'm referring to that with my placement. Or maybe 1 inch setback from this front edge. In that case, the front edge would be the reference surface, the reference edge. For these slides, the reference edge for the front will be equal to the front edge. We don't want it all the way up to the top, because then it would rub up there. Instead, we want it some distance from the top. 2 faux window blinds from the top. That should give us enough gap. So assuming the cabinet has been built square, which this one has, at least I think it has. I'm counting on that it has, and this should go together pretty easily. I'm scooting it forward so that this edge of the slide is flush with the front edge of the cabinet. After the drawer is installed, I can go back and add more screws. Lined with that front edge. Ow, hooked myself good there. Screws are sharp. All right, so I'm gonna use the same technique like before. reference surface for this thing would be the front of this drawer here. Do the same thing on the other side. Pulling it out, still making sure that I'm putting pressure up against the back of the cabinet. Okay. So, use basic offsets there to not complicate things. To put this slide farther down the drawer, you might want to do a 1/2 inch offset on the glide, and then just a blind or two from the drawer top. There it is. Super simple. And now that it works, now that I know it's all squared up, one down, 4 to go. Ow! These screws are so sharp. Look at that. Blood on the cabinet drawer. There we go. Went ahead and verified there that the distance from the top to the bottom of that second drawer was the same on both sides, just in case there was some sort of flexing that happened here with the blinds. It's important to get that screw in the center of the hole, especially if the screws are tapered like this, so that the screw doesn't pull the slide or the drawer up or down. The bit is magnetized. Watch this, can you see that? I want to try and go in the center of that hole, and the bit keeps on moving to the edges of that hole. New plan. Center punch with the screw. So you may have noticed that there has been a fidgety part of this, which is holding the spacers in place. So you can get around that by measuring. All this does is sort of make the process less intimidating by using the spacers. But drawer slides were always really intimidating for me because I just really didn't feel like calculating all the offsets, didn't know that I really understood it. Okay, hear that knocking? There's a screw sticking out too far somewhere. Screws in there kind of at an angle. There we go. Flush. Whew. P.S. One of the questions that I'm sure will show up is about whether or not I'm going to put faces on these to protect these slides, and the answer would be no, because I know dust is supposed to hurt these, make them not slide as well. Dust getting caked in there just doesn't sound like a good idea, and technically, yeah, it's not a good idea at all. But I was aware of that whenever I built these, which are just totally caked in dust because I cleaned this place out with a leaf blower. Look at that. You can also see other problems with this cabinet, by the way, because I didn't build a square. These slides have been in for 5 years, I think, and even this that's loaded with spray paint works awesome. Some of these are soft close Grizzly, some are soft close KV, Shopfox, and the other cabinets I have non-soft close ones. But look, these slides work so well. They haven't shown any signs of annoyance yet. I have not covered them up and don't plan on it because, yeah, it hasn't been an issue. I'm not saying it won't be. You could be proper and do things the right way, but I didn't. And it's worked fine.